Are we rolling with speed? Okay, good. Okay, I'm standing in front of the church, 1405 San Anselmo Avenue, San Anselmo, California.
1405 San Anselmo Avenue. The church was a recording studio started in the 1970s, actually 1970, by Paul Stubblebine and Bruce Wolford. So it was a recording studio, but it was also a center for the community. It was where a lot of musicians would come, hang out, have a place to jam with each other. It was just a really good energy, organic environment where they could just have a creative jam session and let the creative energies kind of a lot of room for exploration.
It was one of the first recording studios that was put together by musicians and locals and kind of members of whatever we were called back then, the alternative hippie type community.
So this whole neighborhood was definitely well entrenched with the music community and with the kind of countercultural movement that was going on during the late 60s and early 70s.
The church eventually outgrew the neighborhood because, as you can probably tell, there's no place to park around here. It used to be the train arrived right over here, and so people might get on the train and come over to church, but once the neighborhood grew up around it, the church was kind of too much for the neighborhood, so they sold it. And in fact, the building was crumbling anyway, so it was probably a good time for the people who were in there to get out.
In 1974, Dave Kessner and Bill Steele came to be the owners of the church.
Kept it until 1978 and ran it as a recording studio for that whole time, and it was mainly Bill engineering and doing that part of it, and myself doing the business part, and both of us playing a lot of music and a lot of sessions.
Just some of the people that recorded at the church, most notably the Sons of Champlin did their 1970 album when they recorded there. Also, Van Morrison is known to have done sections of one of his albums at the church. But in addition to these kind of superstar people that were using it, there's a lot of really important Marin local bands that were using the church. Flying Circus, which was a band out of Muir Beach, very notable, and it included Andre Pessis, who later went on to write for groups like Huey Lewis. Flying Circus recorded there. They recorded their only 45. Also the Redlegs, which was a group of anarchists. It was a band of just completely out there anarchists that used to perform at the Ark in Sausalito.
I mean, Sammy Hagar's Red album was done right there.
Yeah.
Right, and I think it's fair to say that some of the cuts that they got at the church were pretty hot.
Freedom Highway is another notable Marin band that recorded there. And also, really importantly, was Clover, which was the predecessor to Huey Lewis and the News. This was when they were in their early ages. A lot of people in Marin County have very fond memories of Clover, and they were known to spend time at the church and to do recording there as well.
Yeah, Airplay, before they were Huey Lewis and the News.
The bands that eventually became Huey Lewis, and all the Huey Lewis people were recording there.
A long parade of musicians have moved in and out of here in the many, many years since it became the center for whatever it became.
Most of the Bay Area musicians came through there at one time or another while we were there, which would include Steve Miller, Boz Scaggs, Jerry Garcia, I can't even...
Maria Moldauer,
Clover.
Yeah.
Everybody was playing on everybody else's project.
Right.
All the horn players would play on everybody's project.
Uh-huh.
It was 24/7 music, and that was really what was happening there. It was about the music.
Yeah.
The history of Marin County music, it's really interesting because there's a lot of innovations that happened in all of the supporting music industries. So for as many rock stars and notable musicians we have a lot of innovations in sound technology, in recording studios, in instrument development, the artists that were promoting the musicians, the merchandising of musicians. A lot of the things that we associate with the modern music industry today were developed in Marin County. So the church is an excellent example of that as a new style of recording studio that was started in the 1970s.
The studio was not a typical recording studio. Yeah. It wasn't owned by a big record company or a big corporation. Mm-hmm. It was owned just by musicians and locals, and so that's what it made it very easy for locals to become a part of the scene there. You just walk in.
Yeah.
Ever since I was here, musicians, somebody's out, well, there's a vacuum, somebody moves in, but they're always musicians.
The record business was different then, right? Now there's more lawyers than musicians. It's been that way for a long time. But, you know, there was a year, 1968, when Mercury and Capitol and Epic and all these companies came to Marin, signed hundreds of bands contracts. I mean, I've heard some outrageous numbers about how many bands were signed, you know, and I'm talking about Quicksilver and Jefferson, Airplane, and you know, the Dead, and all those bands, you know. And so it was just a different atmosphere completely than is happening in the music business now. It was about the music, it really was about the music. Not to say that there's not some great music out there, but you know, you listen back to the music from the 60s and 70s, and it's pretty unique compared to the new stuff that's coming out now.
So there was these two recording studios that, in tandem with the church, started the history of independent recording studios. So previous to that, it was mostly unions. You have to go by union rules. It was a very structured experience when an artist would go into the recording studio. And with these new recording studios in Marin County, they were much more organic. They did not abide by union rules. You didn't have to have the 9 to 5 with structured breaks at, you know, different points. It was a lot more free-flowing, so the musicians could interact with each other, they could collaborate, they could, you know, basically have jam sessions and let a lot of the music come naturally to them while they were in the studio and record that. And so the church was very instrumental in that type of atmosphere that Marin County set up in the recording industry.
We recorded bands live. We did a lot of demos, and those demos were where we would set the whole band up at once and just cut everything all at once and just let the tracks bleed into one another. We did get great separation because of the soundproofing that we did in the building. But guys loved to record there because they could play like they were playing live, and it was hard to capture that in a LA kind of recording, you know, where you go in and lay the bass and the drums and the keyboard and down, and then you overdub all these parts and everything. It just doesn't have that same feel as a live thing. So there was a session going on there one night. I mean, this is a kind of the kind of thing that would happen there. And a phone call came in about, I don't know, 2 o'clock in the morning, something like that, for Duck Dunn, who was a bass player. And so Duck takes the phone, and it's a guitar player in the Blues Brothers band. What's his
Steve
name?
Cropper.
Steve Cropper's on the phone, and he goes, Duck, you got to come back to New York. We got this gig that you got to come do. This was on a Wednesday night, you know. And he says, when do I have to be there? He says, well, you got to be here Saturday, because it's on this TV show called Saturday Night Live, and these two guys are going to do a thing called the Blues Brothers.
I think it was, it's hard to say from this distance, but certainly a lot of the musical activity that took place in Marin was centered around the building.
It would have to be described as a funky, homegrown, organic epicenter for the musical community and for a lot of musical collaborations.
Can't tell you whether it was important or not. All I know is this was the center, you know, Ground Zero.
This community music place.
Yeah, it was a place where you could be free with your music.
What makes a musician is a place to play, and this is a place to play.
Freedom would be a word that I would use as a musician, to be able to go in there and, you know, it's a little tough when you're under the gun of a record company and so forth. You sometimes don't get your way, but there you got your way. You could play your music there.
They will always be musicians until the place burns down, and it's pretty stout. I don't think it will.